This lecture is dedicated to straightening UV edges. So we're going to achieve that using either the weld/align tool or auto align, or the scale to 0 on either the X or Y axis. So that's basically what this lecture is about. But additionally, I'm going to show you what happens when you unwrap a cone in a different order and how to fix the problems that result. So we're going to go ahead and create a cone. I know we just did this, but this is a good shape to demonstrate all of the stuff that I just talked about. We're going to convert all of these edges to quads as if we were doing a follow active quads, and then we're going to take it from there. So I'm going to do this in a little bit different order than I did the first time. The first time I deleted the bottom face and then I constructed that. This time we're going to reconstruct all the top first. So remember what I did is I selected this middle vertex and I said that you could snap this up there, and if you trusted yourself you could just delete the vertex. That's exactly what we're going to do this time, so you can see a little variation here. So I'm going to move my cursor to the selected and then delete that vertex to get rid of all that geometry. Now my 3D cursor is up there, and I do trust myself not to left click because I have some experience in Blender. So I'm going to use my edge selection and Alt right click on this and extrude this up to any point and just let go. Now I can just go over to my mesh, snap, selection to cursor offset, and that will bring it up to where I want it to go. Now if you haven't noticed already, the faces of this object are inside out. So we're going to need to flip some normals here. We can do that in just a moment, but first I want to scale this to 0.02 so that we have something that looks more like a cone. Now this whole shape is actually turned inside out. You'll notice that there is a bottom face. You can only see it when you look top down, but if I look at this from the bottom, it looks invisible. And the same thing on the top here. There is a face up there, but if you were looking at it from underneath, that's where the face is actually detectable. This whole thing is actually inside out. So I can select all and I can Control F and flip normals, and that would be one way to fix this. But that's only because all of the normals happen to be facing inwards. What if there was something different going on? You'll see this from time to time where you have kind of an unrecognizable pattern of faces that are flipped backwards and the rest are not. So let's go ahead and flip just those faces and you can see the kind of behavior that I'm talking about. When you see something like this, there is a quick and easy way to resolve this as well. You can select all, and instead of hitting Control F and flipping normals, which is really only going to just reverse everything in the opposite direction, instead of doing that, hit Control N and that will correct all the normals so that they're all facing outwards. So that's a very quick and easy way to handle that problem. So that's just a little bonus tip inside this lecture. There's still a lot more to cover here because we're actually focusing on straightening edges in the UV. Before we can do that, we got to finish crafting this so it's made up entirely of quads. So our next step is to delete these faces. I want to get rid of this face and this face up top here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete faces. Now using edge selection tool, I'm going to select this edge here and extrude and scale to 0.02 to create my second straw hole. Now, one of the things I like to do while I'm thinking of it is to reset the cursor so it's in the middle of the world space. I don't need to hold that mark anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and snap that back to the center. Not really that important here, but anytime you create any new geometry, you always want to create from the center of the world space so that everything will stay on grid and be able to snap together nice and easily. So now we have a shape that's made entirely out of quads. Let's go ahead and unwrap it. So we're going to need to select both of these tiny little straw circle edges. So here's that one. And let's go ahead and look at the top and repeat Shift Alt right click so that we have both of those edges selected. Now we'll go ahead and mark those as seams, and let's find the back of our cone and Alt right click on that and mark that as a seam as well. Now we can go over to our UV editing window, select all, and unwrap. So when you get a shape like this that's made up entirely of quads, you can line up all these edges even with a grid. That's what this lecture is all about. Let's turn on stretch so that we can see what's happening here. You can see there's a lot of stretching going on here. And also I can turn on area stretching. You can see that it's actually a lot worse than it seems if you look at it that way. It's a good idea to kind of toggle back and forth between these sometimes to get a better idea of what you're dealing with. Okay, so we want to fix this. Ultimately, what would be nice is if we could take these edges and straighten them out. And anytime you do a search online, you'll find people talking about scaling along the y-axis to 0, or scaling to 0 to either the x or the y-axis. And this is what that would look like. If I scale this on the y to 0, it's going to straighten that out. Not really that convenient, and not that quick either. So if you had to do all of these lines that way, it would take a long time. Another way you could do the same exact thing is, notice the UVs menu here. There's a section called Weld/Align. You can get to that menu by pushing the W key. This is the menu right here. So if I select that edge and I hit W, I have the Weld Align menu here. So I can hit Align Y, and it will basically do the same exact thing that the Scale Y0 just did for us. So let me undo. The way to achieve that is W, and then just click on Align Y. So that's one way to do that. Another way is you could auto align, and Blender will intuitively know that you want to go in this direction. Sometimes it'll get it wrong, and when it does, you'll want to undo, open up the Weld Align, and then choose Align Y. Likewise, you can align this to the X by just hitting Align X. Let me undo both of those and we'll continue learning. So the Weld Align menu is convenient because I only have to push the letter W, but having to click on these is kind of a little bit of a task. So if you wanted to make this even easier, I can just hit W and then auto align. Notice the A is underlined. That means all I need to do is push the letter A, and it will be the same as if I clicked on this auto align button. And I can repeat that with all of these lines. W, A, and then Alt right click, W, A, and repeat. Alt right click, pushing W, and then A, and repeating over and over again. Just like that. Now you see no stretching in here. Let's go ahead and take a look at our area. You can see that the area stretching is actually pretty severely stretched, and that's kind of a problem. In a situation like this, I can only think of one other thing to sort of bail us out of this mess, and that is using the proportional editing tool. Proportional editing can be enabled by just clicking this icon down here, which is disabled by default, and just click on enabled. Now when you loop select these edges, you'll be able to scale on the X, and you'll see that everything kind of moves away proportionally from the center. This is a good way to sort of iron out this mess a little bit, but it's not going to bail us out of trouble completely. As I zoom out, you can see that it is a little bit better. I can continue working on this. By the way, you can change the size of this circle here, which affects the geometry in this way. So I can kind of come out here like this and maybe continue stretching it like this. The problem is eventually there's gonna be a point where if you see it's dark blue down here and light blue up here, and it's green down here and blue up there, there comes a point where you have to kind of settle on something in between. Remember, ultimately, the follow active quads is going to do a much better job at this. So if you have the choice, you could always switch gears and unwrap this with the follow active quads tool. Let's take a look at the grid real quick just to see what this looks like. And it looks like basically the Y needs to be increased, so it looks more like squares. But the problem is that some of these are very narrow and some of them are very wide, and that's what we're trying to fix with this proportional editing. So if I could go back and forth with this for a while, and really, why do any of that at all if you can just fix this whole problem by using the follow active quad. So I'm going to go to one of the front faces here and select all, and follow active quads. You can see it does a much better job of ironing that out. And if I want to even out some of these checkerboarding patterns, I can always select all and scale, in this case I think on the X, to sort of balance out the checkerboarding to something that I can live with. And we'll check with the angle and the area, and you see there's virtually no stretching at all. So it's really all about just knowing what tools to use, and having a good understanding of the tools is really the first step to problem solving. So this lecture has been basically a mishmash of loose ends. So I think we're ready to actually start working with some real-world situations. So in the next section, what I've done is I've purchased a handful of models, and I'm going to be sharing those models with you for the purpose of practicing and furthering your education on UV unwrapping. By the end of this course, you should have a pretty good handle on what's going on and be able to problem solve on your own and pretty much unwrap just about any object that life could throw at you. So get ready for the next section, and I'll see you there.